On this week's full-time roundup, Champions League does not disappoint. Europa League doesn't disappoint. And are Chelsea going to finish 6th? We discuss this and so much more. Full-time roundup starts right now. And welcome into the latest edition of the full-time roundup. Matt Gesslin here, joined as always by Daniel Brackett. We are back in our normal cadence as I have officially rejoined the podcast for the last couple of weeks. It feels good to be back in the swing of things with Daniel. Daniel, how are we doing? Thursday, May 2nd, almost the weekend. I don't know about you, but I'm super stoked for this weekend just to slam the computer shut and say time to get me away from some work.
Yeah, I know that you have a fun weekend planned here with the music festival that's going to be in Charlotte. So I know you're looking forward to that, and I hope you have a fantastic time, and I hope the weather kind of sticks out for you because I know that's a concern here in the Queen City this weekend. But yeah, no, it's great to be back with you. We were able to kind of have a pint yesterday as we watched the PSG game. So I enjoyed that, and let's go ahead and talk footy, and we'll go ahead and get to the standalone Premier League game. You mentioned that you're back. I find it, kind of odd that as soon as Chelsea start playing a little bit better, you just happen to start making regular appearances again. Maybe the whole moving thing was a sham. I don't know. But all jokes aside, Chelsea get a really, really, really good win here against Spurs. Their starting lineup was not the best. Their bench was laughable, and they still beat Spurs 2-0 at Stamford Bridge.
Yeah, I mean, you could also say that Chelsea knew I was moving and just didn't want to play very well while I was going through that period. So either way, however you want to look at it, however you want to look at it. So we're back though, and Chelsea, I don't know if I wouldn't say they're back. We've talked about this all season long. Of course, they're still kind of in a little bit of transition, especially given what we're used to seeing from a West London side like Chelsea in the past. But this was an absolute beauty of a performance, a derby, and Chelsea came out to play. They looked ready to go from the jump, and you could see that the way that they were flying around the pitch, and felt a little flat from a Spurs perspective. You also saw it post game how much this game meant to Chelsea. It was pretty surprising. Normally, historically, a little bit more stoic of a side, kind of that West London, upper class type of team, if you will, kind of just ho hum, always kind of expecting the W, and a little bit different performance, a little bit different feel from this Chelsea side. I don't know if that's Mauricio Pochettino and what he's trying to instill, or if it's just such a young squad trying to find their way in the Premier League, that it means a little bit more to them now that they've kind of have a season under their belt, understand what it means to put on that crest and that kit. But it was a great performance, and a lot of places we can go here, Daniel. I'm not sure if you have anywhere in particular that you want to start, but for me, again, just a little bit of inconsistency from Chelsea. This could have been a lot worse from a Spurs perspective. If you ask me, I think Chelsea still have a problem finishing, and yet they still get 2 goals, which gives them the 3 points, and now 3 points behind Manchester United for 6th place, with a big game for Manchester United on the docket still to go. This I said in the teaser and the upfront, they could finish 6th, and with the schedule that they have in front of them, they actually genuinely could finish 6th potentially.
Yeah, no, you mentioned 2 goals, 2 set piece goals. So not from open play, but that's not a Chelsea problem. That's a Spurs problem. And their set piece set piece weakness continues to haunt them. It happened in the North London derby on Sunday. It continued to haunt them today. So just, current trends, I just feel like at some point it's just not that hard to improve that. And, if that's the reason why you're going to finish 5th instead of 4th, that's a tough pill to swallow. But I guess if I was having this argument with not an argument, but a discussion with a friend of mine today. And he basically just said, hey, we were like 8th or 9th last year. If you told me we'd be fighting for Champions League, I'd be happy anyways. So I think Spurs fans are just happy to be in the position that they're in. But that's 3 straight losses for Tottenham Hotspur. I know they played Arsenal, their rivals, on Sunday, so 2 tough games in a row. But then they do play Liverpool this weekend. So will that be 4? They're catching Liverpool at probably the best time possible. So there's definitely a chance that they're able to get a result. But I usually don't read text messages just in general, but I wanted to bring a light to the podcast listeners. You, as a quote from Matt Gaslin, can't believe I'm going to say this, but might be the biggest Gunners fan in 2 weeks when they play United! Explanation point. Last time I checked, Arsenal is a rival. As Spurs is a rival of North London, Arsenal should be a rival of North London. So, I just wanted to hear your thoughts and your explanation on some fraudulent fan behavior, as you'd call it.
Yeah, well, I'll get to that first in a second. But first,
go ahead and address it.
No, I'll get there in a minute. I do want to talk about the game first, and a couple of things you brought up. You mentioned the 2 set piece goals, of course. Still Chelsea felt like the better team in the run of play. Nico Jackson had an opportunity. Mikhail Mudryk leads him into a one-on-one with Vicario, who makes a great save. Of course, could pass it over to Cole Palmer, who would have had an absolute sitter, just straight tap in, empty netter. It feels like that's, again, like I said, felt like there were opportunities out there to put this game away earlier on and have a bigger scoreline. That's still one of the concerns for me. If you're asking kind of some of the downsides to winning 2-0, it wasn't a great performance all around. Again, that's one of the things you kind of saw that happen, and you almost expected him not to finish. And then of course he doesn't finish it. So, that's still one of the things. Of course, 14 starters or 14 first team players out with injury as well going into this one. So really a makeshift squad here. It's still a pretty strong starting squad, just given the talent, but all youngsters, right? No real veteran presence on the field except for maybe Conor Gallagher. If you're really looking at that, maybe Cucurella, but that's, again, very a big stretch as far as looking for veteran presence. A lot of youngsters, and even the bench was all teenagers. So a lot to look forward to, a lot to still kind of develop with this Chelsea side. You mentioned Spurs and the to go on the flip side of that, Spurs having a little bit of a difficult run. I think it was very telling post game to hear Ange Postecoglou say that the team has kind of lost the message that he's trying to articulate and doesn't really resonate with them anymore. I think that's a little concerning, especially given it's only his first season in charge. I think, of course, we talked about it before. I don't know if it's necessarily a loss of or lack of recognizing the message as much as it is just not being able to play that style of play, right? Like they're all gung-ho, straightforward, attack all season long, which, credit to him, it's been entertaining to watch. And I think if you ask many Spurs fans, they'd much prefer this style of play versus that more pragmatic type of style, but it does take a toll on the team. And I think something that we've talked about, given that this is Ange's first real season, he's going to get some new players in the offseason that are going to kind of fit that model and fit what he's trying to do more realistically. And I think as much as it is maybe that they're checked out, I think it's more a matter of just they're just not used to his style of play. You go through the preseason, yes, you kind of get ready for it, but to go 38 games plus with other tournaments, it takes a toll on you. So I think that's concerning. I think Liverpool, although they're in poor form, this is a game that's winnable for them to even potentially stay within touch. I think Spurs are kind of checked themselves out, ready to go for the end of the season. They can't finish fourth. They're probably not going to get caught for fifth. So they're kind of in that fifth position no matter what. And I wonder if that kind of gives Liverpool an edge going into this weekend. So I think it's a great time to play Spurs, even though you are Liverpool coming off a pretty weak performance on the weekend.
Yeah. I mean, Spurs also have 7 senior injuries. The squad is definitely not up to par with how Ange Postecoglou wants to play. The rebuild was started in the summer. So there's still a big rebuild to happen. I think that you mentioned Ange needs athletes, and you can see kind of the legs are getting heavy here for the Tottenham men. So, disappointing, and it might be a really disappointing end of the season after, a brilliant start. They were first for, I think the first like 6 weeks or something like that, maybe even longer. But if I'm a Tottenham fan, I'm still excited for the future here. And I think that if they make the right signings in the summer, they could definitely be a top 4 challenger for next year, maybe even more, depending on if they fix the set pieces weaknesses and kind of clean up a little bit at the back. But I think it's time for you to address your comments here.
Sure. Yeah, I'll get to that. Yeah, I mean, look, you texted in the group text that Arsenal are a rival. To be honest, yes, maybe they are just because they play in London, but they're really maybe the fourth or fifth rival for us. To be completely honest, if you want me to go in order, our actual rival would be Spurs today. This was our biggest game. It's clearly not their biggest game, as North London Derby is arguably their biggest rival. Then you'd have Fulham, the West London Derby, right down the road.
Okay.
You'd have Crystal Palace, actually, which ironically is higher probably in the pecking order between Arsenal and Crystal Palace. West Ham, East London Derby, is a bigger rival there. You could arguably say Leeds, given historically just what has happened in the past in FA Cups and other tournaments, and when Leeds was in the top flight going back, and then Arsenal. So don't get me wrong, Arsenal. Anytime you play a London side, you're going to want to beat London. That just because it's the capital, it's where you live. But London's a big place. There's roughly 22 clubs that play professional football within London proper. And I'm not discrediting anything about playing Arsenal. We get up and get ready for those games as if we were playing Manchester United or Manchester City. But as far as the pecking order of rivals, Arsenal is not in the top 3 for Chelsea. I would love to hear if any Chelsea fans feel differently. They can at me at Fulltime Roundup or Life of Gesslin. But I guarantee you, Daniel, contrary to what you think, many Chelsea fans would feel the same way that in the order that I just gave it. So yes, to put a finer point on where this came about, this came because Daniel feels a little slighted that I said that he should not have been a fan or rooting for Manchester United at any point in time, which he was a couple weeks ago because Liverpool were in the title race when they were playing Man City.
Yes.
And so that, again, Manchester United and Liverpool are fierce rivals. And so that is a different argument than saying Arsenal, our third or fourth biggest rival, I would root for. So just want to put that out there.
That's fair. And I'm glad you provided the context there, because that's why I was giving you a hard time in the first place.
Oh, I'm aware. I'm very well
aware. I know. And I wanted to give the context for the listeners as well. And, how basically what I put it is, look, Manchester United, although they have owned us this year, unfortunately, and I hate that, and they are a longtime rival, and I dislike many of my Manchester United friends, and I talk to them on a daily basis. If they win or they lose, at what cost? Basically, City hoisting the trophy for 6 times in 7 years. And at this point, obviously I hate Manchester United, but they're very far away from us in the table, and it's all about beating City. Someone's got to beat City. And so, as Liverpool has crashed out, which I am well aware of, and you have done a good job at letting me know, all in good fun, of course. But, Arsenal, like I am backing Arsenal and wanting Arsenal to win because I am tired of Manchester City's dominance. And it's literally whoever Manchester City plays on a weekly basis, I am the biggest fan of the other team. And I feel like a lot of people don't hate Manchester City, but I'm just tired of them winning everything. And that's kind of where I stand. But this was a good conversation. I'm glad you addressed it. And
also let it be known that in 2 weeks' time, for once in our lives, we will agree on something, that Arsenal should beat Manchester United, right? So
yes,
let's just end it there.
Put a bow on it.
Will love that result. That way we could potentially get that game in hand with our lesser schedule, if you will, and jump Manchester United. That would just be icing on the cake. So to your point,
I'd be okay for that.
Put a bow on it. We'll put a bow on it right there, and we'll move on, Daniel, because there was still a lot of action going on other than today with just a single game. We had, of course, had midweek games, and we had a game as well, 2 games in Europe. Aside from the Premier League, we had Europa League, which we'll get to in a minute. I know you kept your eye on that competition as well as the Europa Conference League, which I would love to hear your thoughts on Aston Villa and Olympiacos later. But of course, we wouldn't be doing our fans and listeners a service if we didn't talk about the two biggest games of the week, arguably maybe two of the biggest games of the year on Tuesday and Wednesday, which of course were the Champions League. We had Bayern Munich and Real Madrid on Tuesday. And then you already alluded to the PSG Dortmund game, which we caught a little bit together on Wednesday. Let's start with the Tuesday game, Real Madrid versus Bayern, two of arguably the greatest sides, as we were just talking about, two of the other greatest sides, maybe in Manchester United and Liverpool, in the sport. We had an absolute classic here between Dortmund, Bayern Munich and Madrid on Tuesday, and it just didn't disappoint. Madrid looked to be the favorite going home in the second half, in the second leg, but don't count out Bayern Munich, who yet again proved to everybody why they're still one of the best teams in Europe, even though they had a disappointing season in the Bundesliga.
No, absolutely. And to open up the scoring was just another vintage Toni Kroos pass to Vinicius. He picks up the ball in space, which is one of the biggest no-nos, ever. Vinicius checks and draws in Kim right through the middle. Nice cut pass, diagonal, and Vinny's off to the races, puts it in the back of the net. And Real Madrid are looking like maybe they're going to have a walk in the park today. But Real Madrid are able to bounce back with a Leroy Sané absolute banger. Now, we could argue, and I'd like to hear your point, should have Lunin saved that on his near post, but it was a good goal. And then Musiala draws the pen by a really bad defensive lapse by Lucas Vasquez, dangles the foot there. Carvajal was suspended. That's why he started. And then Rodrigo gives him a lifeline with Kim drawing the penalty for Vinicius to get a second of the match. But it was a good game. I thought it would be a little bit more cagier, but we were treated to an excellent match.
Yeah, I mean, two absolute blunders, if you will, defensively by Kim, who's just had a really horrendous season. Unfortunately for him, of course, was voted the best defender in Serie A last season before making the move to Bayern Munich in the summer, and just has not looked the same player, whether that was through injury or just the number of games with Asia Cup. Has not looked great. Absolutely bit on that Vinicius Jr. Step into the middle for that first goal. And Vinny said, "Thank you very much. I will have that space behind." And Toni Kroos, as you mentioned, a player that you don't want to give space to, played absolute beauty of a ball in behind. And Vinicius Jr. just puts it home for that opener. And then what are you doing on that second one?
Do you mind if I just butt in here?
Sure.
I think more of the Cardinals' sin there was letting Toni Kroos turn, take 3 touches, pick up his head, signal to Vinicius to make the run, and then to pass it. Like if I'm like, we've seen game plans, throughout history, when you have a maestro of that caliber who can literally place a ball anywhere on the pitch with the perfect speed at the perfect time. Like someone like Goretzka or Kimmich or whoever else was playing liner could have they should have man-marked Kroos basically, because he's the maestro. He's the orchestra, conductor here for this Real Madrid side. So I thought it was, a worse defensive lapse, letting him pick his head up in the middle of the pitch, on a counterattack. Now, obviously, Kim did bite on that Vinicius check.
That's a bite and a half. I mean, that's like that all-time bite.
But also, from my playing days, obviously I've never played at that high of level, and neither, have most of us. But, I would have liked to see Eric Dyer slide as Kim, did step up. And I think the chemistry there is not exactly great. But yes, I will admit that Kim did not cover himself in glory at all, especially drawing the second, the penalty for Real Madrid late in the match.
Definitely a great point. Everyone's talking about the Kim defensive play. I'll give you that on not giving a player of Toni Kroos's ability, time, and space. I think it's a combination of errors, right? You mentioned Eric Dyer not covering as well, and it was a little bit too separated. Should have been a little tighter in the middle, and there's just too much space there for both of those players who are world class, and that kind of You make those kinds of mistakes in the semifinal of the Champions League, and you're going to get burned. And you mentioned some of that chemistry. Of course, Matthias de Ligt was out with an injury, who picked up in the weekend in the Bundesliga. Arguably, probably was going to slot right in there alongside Dyer. They've been a pretty formidable duo, contrary to what people think about Eric Dyer. Probably the fifth choice for Thomas Tuchel. That's just, with Upamecano not playing well, with obviously we've alluded to some of Kim's issues. That was his best combination that he was relying on the last couple of weeks. And so that chemistry might not have been there. And then from the second one, honestly, there's no need for Kim to dive in there. You have numbers in the box. Yeah, totally bad. And you have numbers in the box there defensively. You can contain Rodrigo, and he puts a foot in. And then, of course, Vinny puts the second one away. Now, to answer your question about Leroy Sané and whether Lunin should have made that save, that's a tough one, right? Because, yes, arguably, from where the position and where the shot was taken, you probably should. But it was hit with such pace. And also in the back of your mind, he went near post, which if you look at where he was on the pitch, that's a tough angle to attack. You probably, if you're a goalkeeper, subconsciously in your mind thinking, he's going to go probably far corner, maybe even pass it across the box. And so you're kind of cheating a little bit. And then with the pace that it's hit with, I think that's kind of what caught him off guard. And look, bigger picture from me in this instance is just how much of a talent Leroy Sané can be when he wants to be. And I think we haven't seen enough of that this season. I think that's part of the reason why Bayern Munich have had a disappointing season, not just Leroy Sané in particular, that whole set of players other than Harry Kane, who's delivered week in, week out for that roster. We talked about Kim underperforming. Upamecano, who's a French national starter at center back, had a terrible season as well. So, it's just one more example that when this team wants to play, Daniel, they can still be one of the best teams in Europe. And that's arguably when there's nothing else for them to play for right now other than the Champions League. You see that. And that's why this matchup was so great to watch. And it's going to be an interesting second leg in the Bernabéu, although Real Madrid probably have the leg up, given that they get to go home basically all square, one game to win it all and go into the Champions League final, which, what can we say? Real Madrid Champions League final. It's almost a synonym of each other, and feels like it's just inevitable.
It certainly is. And I just wanted to also give Thomas Tuchel credit here, which, I don't always love doing. I don't love him as a manager, but I do think he is, one of the better managers out there. And he's gotten a lot of flack when he was at Bayern, and he's gotten flack basically everywhere he's went, but he is, a renowned winner. And when it comes to these cup competitions, this is where he excels. And, I think depending on the landscape of the club, a lot of clubs would be happy to have him. If he could just tweak a little bit of his man management here, I think that would go a long way, because he's a great tactical coach here. So I'm not going to count.
Do you think he ends up in Manchester United?
I don't think that would be a good fit, to be honest. I think that would be a really bad fit. That's like almost, he's a better Ten Hag, but you need a charismatic manager at Manchester United. I feel like they haven't had a manager with charisma since Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. And of course he, lacked the tactical ability. So I don't think he should go there. I don't know who, there's just not that many coaches out there these days, which is kind of surprising for how many, coaching positions are open right now. But I don't see him meshing well with a lot of the young talent. He doesn't like usually playing the kids either. And that's kind of what Manchester United are leaning on. So no, I do not think that would be a good fit. But I feel like if I think hard enough, I could find a good fit for him. I think going back to Dortmund would work actually really well. But of course, they're looking like they're going to extend Terzic. But that is a conversation for a different day. And I do think Real Madrid will probably do the inevitable here. But I'm not going to count out Bayern here, because I just don't think Real Madrid have been that impressive for the last 4 legs. I think they were really bad in the second leg against Manchester City, and by the grace of God, they were able to hold out to penalties and won in the penalty shootout. But I'm not backing Bayern here, but I'm saying, obviously due to recent history, it'll probably be Madrid, but I think Bayern still have, say, a 40% chance in this leg, which is higher than I think a lot of other people would give them credit for.
I actually totally agree with you. I think that the structure and the talent that's there at Bayern Munich is a little bit more put together. I know you've talked about this before on the podcast over the course of the campaign with our good friend Ewan, and just kind of what that structure looks like from Madrid. But at the same time, they have game breakers, and you just need one game breaker, especially with one game to go. And so it will be interesting. Like I said, they're playing at home. I do give Madrid the advantage, but don't sleep on Bayern Munich. They have the skill, and again, that's all they're playing for. Now, you mentioned, and when I brought up Manchester United, youngsters and Borussia Dortmund, and boy, Daniel, on Wednesday, did we see one of these youngsters at Borussia Dortmund, as well as ties with Manchester United, absolutely shine. Of course, I'm talking about Jadon Sancho, who has been the darling of this game. All you've heard about is people raving about him and his performance in this one, and rightfully so. He was absolutely phenomenal. Of course, Borussia Dortmund find a way, get the 1-0 win at home. It wasn't easy. It definitely was not comfortable, and you just wonder what's going to happen at the Parc des Princes in the second leg. But where do we start here with this one? Do we start with PSG's lack of finishing? Of course, they had about a handful, if not a dozen, quality chances to equalize, if not go ahead in this one. But again, as we've talked about, Borussia Dortmund find a way and bounce back after a really poor performance in the Bundesliga against Leipzig on over the weekend.
I think we should definitely highlight the lack of finishing, but I think it should be for both sides. Füllkrug got the goal, but he had a couple really good opportunities to put a second and really put the nail in the coffin or make things really difficult going to the Parc des Princes next week. And so I thought both teams, did not finish their chances whatsoever. Obviously, Dortmund were able to get a goal and PSG did not. But it felt like the football gods were on Dortmund's side here. If you're not counting Sancho, who had 13 take-ons completed in this match, which is, I think, what Antony has had 13 take-ons all season. I saw that tweet, which is a little bit unfair to an Antony, but still just crazy number. He was matched up against Nuno Mendes, an absolute fantastic athlete. I think I rate him highly as a player. He's still young, so maybe the defensive capabilities aren't exactly where they should be, but still to take on a player like Nuno Mendes and just skin him 13 different times is quite unbelievable. And Jadon Sancho was at his best, but Mbappe has a really good opportunity, double post, and then the rebound hits the post as well. When I saw that going, I just kind of thought to myself, this is probably not going to be PSG's day. And Ousmane Dembele had a golden opportunity late in the match, a nice little layoff in the middle, probably at the PK spot, and he blows it over against his former side. So we talked about how maybe Dembele revenge arc. I think we talked about it offline, but he played really well against Barcelona. I was thinking he would probably bring his best game against Dortmund as well, another former side, but he was just a little sloppy all over the place. His touch was off in the middle of the pitch. And I mean, I don't think this leg is out of reach for PSG. And I think they're going to be very motivated at home and with a great atmosphere. But, if I'm PSG, I really would have liked to get an equalizer late here to make things a little bit easier for them in the second leg.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, two things. I think Luis Enrique gets a little bit in his own head here where he plays Dembele. Yes, he starts him out on the wing, but he kind of plays him a little bit more central, and Mbappe starts to drop in a little deeper. You wonder if you look at it, right? Mbappe with arguably maybe the fastest player in football. If you're Mats Hummels, or Schlotterbeck, what do you prefer? Mbappe playing 10 to 15 yards in front of you so you can see him coming at you, or playing right on your back shoulder, kind of in between the lines. And I think Mbappe gave them a little bit of an easy way out in this one. Of course, he still had his chances. let's just be honest. PSG absolutely dominated this game. I do think that there was opportunity, like you mentioned, full crew to make it 2-0. Yes, Dortmund had opportunities, which we know PSG are not the most tight in the back, but PSG absolutely should have won this game on the road. And I think Kylian Mbappe absolutely has to step up in the second leg and announce himself as that player, right? You look at Messi or Ronaldo in the past for Barcelona and Real Madrid respectively, and when the chips are down, and PSG fans view Mbappe as the same category or same tier as those two guys, and when the chips were down, those players would put the team on their back and say, I got you. We're going to go and we're going to advance and we're going to make it to the final, or we're going to win this trophy. And I think in this situation where they're playing a weaker side, and just what it is, Dortmund are definitely not up to par if PSG play the way that they should. We saw that here as well, where again, the chances just didn't go in, but PSG were dominant. Mbappe has to dominate this second leg. Whether or not he scores or gets all the assists, he has to be more noticeable and get the ball and make himself present in this game. I think if he does that, which I think he does, I think PSG walk away with this one in the second leg. I think 1-0 was not enough at home for Dortmund. I think they needed that second at least to make it competitive. If you ask me, 3-1 probably is the aggregate here. I think PSG get 2 or 3 easily at home. Of course, 3-1 would mean they get 3 at home, but I do think that they kind of walk away with this one. Now, don't sleep on Dortmund. They can definitely play defensively and get that counterattacking goal. But from my perspective, just what I watched in this game, even with Vitinha not playing his best as well, which I think you'll see a different Vitinha at home. You'll see a Barcola play better at home as well. There will definitely be pressure on this team. Marseille is the only French team to win the Champions League, win a European competition. They have a chance at home to go and be in their second Champions League final. But pressure aside, I think this team is better than the team on the other side of the field, and I think they get it done. Now, will that happen? Dortmund definitely will have a lot to say about that, but just looking at it on paper, I think PSG have what it takes to advance.
I agree. And I agree with your, tactical, comment there with Luis Enrique. And I do understand why he did that. Ian Maatsen at the left side is a great athlete, and he's a great defender. Ryerson on the right side is also a pretty good athlete, a good defender as well. So I think what Lucho was thinking here was, look, Dortmund's weakness is the midfield, and they wanted to target Mats Hummels, who's a great defender, but he's, a couple years past his prime and a step slow. So I think that the game plan was to overload the midfield as well as Nico and Mats Hummels, and hopefully, have Dembele, Vitinha, and Mbappe kind of combine and then knock one over the top, kind of like they did with Cruz and Vinicius. Now, that didn't happen as much as I'd like it to. I'd also, would like to hear your thoughts. I think Mbappe, at the end of the day, is best on the wing. I don't think he enjoys playing down the middle. And maybe you could see, I thought Muani was garbage when he came on. So I actually would maybe like to see a tweak of formation here, maybe see Barcola dropped, Mbappe on the left, and then Carlos Ramos down the middle, who's just a big body who just finds himself in good positions. And I think, maybe that little subtle tweak up top could really, pay dividends for PSG.
There's no doubt that that Mbappe's preferred and best position is on the wing, no doubt. And he prefers playing there. It'll be interesting to see what happens when he goes to Real Madrid, which is a big discussion where Vinicius Jr. will play. I think in this instance, and I mentioned it a minute ago, I don't think it really matters where Kylian Mbappe plays in this particular matchup. Now, the final, probably a little different story. I just think that he needs to be on the ball and make things happen, whether that's him playing in the middle, if that means dropping a little deeper to get the ball. I know that's contrary to what I said, where he should be playing off the back shoulder of a Schlotterbeck or Hummels. In this instance, though, he needs to be the playmaker, the playmaker, not a playmaker, the playmaker for this team. He has that skill. He has that ability, that cachet, and that stardom and that superstardom of what people think of Kylian Mbappe to be. He cannot go out of this game, even if they lose, if they don't win the final, if they don't win this round. Kylian Mbappe has to announce himself and make it be that it was not his fault that PSG did not advance. If he does everything in his power and yet they fall a little short, maybe on goal differential or the luck of the draw or luck of the ball, how it bounces off a post, like you said before, then you can live with that. But if he is kind of quiet and goes into the night by not giving everything that he can, I think that's a totally different conversation. And I just don't see that happening. So yes, if you're asking me where you start him in the lineup, it's probably left-hand side, but he has that ability to float and get and do what he needs to do. And he probably will end up on the left-hand side 85% of the time in this matchup, but he should still be able to kind of give me the ball, watch what I do with it type of thing. And I think he gets that. I think he knows that. I think he feels that. I think at home, he relishes that. And in the big moment, the big players shine. And I think that's what you're going to see. I hope that's what you see from Kylian Mbappe, because he's too talented not to have that type of moment and put his foot on the game and say, hey, Messi, hey, Ronaldo, this is my time. And I'm the guy now. And I think that's something that we've all waited for Kylian Mbappe to step up and do.
Absolutely. And to get to Europa League here, Bayern win yet again against AS Roma at Roma. It was not going to be an easy game. And, when I saw the lineups, I definitely backed Bayer Leverkusen here to win this game. But when I saw that starting lineup, Xabi Alonso kind of mixed it up here. And I was like, is Xabi Alonso overthinking this? Boniface, Schick were not starting. I mean, Adli, Verts, and Frimpong front three, which is a little interesting as Frimpong has played like that right wing back. And then, Grimaldo, Stanisic were the wing backs with Hincapié, Ta, and Tapsoba as the back three. I thought that was very interesting, a tactical switch there. And I didn't notice that, Xabi has been kind of riding with the young goalkeeper, Kovar and net for the Europa League competition, as well as, the DFB Polkai. I was surprised not to see Herdecki out there, who's started every single match in the Bundesliga. So I honestly didn't notice that they switched goalkeepers out here. But, they got it done. Of course, Florian Wirtz scores the opener, and then Andrik, the center defensive mid, gets the second one to kind of put this tie to bed here. And they're going to be, able to kind of not worry about this second leg here at home against Roma, who's going to have to really go out and beat them. So they do play Frankfurt this weekend, so maybe they don't have to rest as much as they have to beforehand if they didn't win this comfortably. But, another week, another win, and, this beautiful run just keeps going.
Yeah, it's a interesting way that Xabi set his team up today too. It shows you that he clearly has a way of understanding the game, right? He's not just going to line up. It's a system for sure, but he's willing to make a little bit of tweaks and adjustments as needed. Of course, also big for them. Palacios gets in as a sub after a really unfortunate. He was playing so well before his injury. They've been doing this without him as well. Get to have him back. Doesn't help that Roma's defender gives them a little bit of a gift in the first goal as well with that pass back. And you mentioned Florian Wirtz putting it away. So all things are, again, as we expect, positive for Bayer Leverkusen. This run is unbelievable. We've talked about it not only in the Bundesliga, but now they're one less game away from being perfect all season long. And so for me, this one's almost in the bag. It's more a matter of, will they go and get a draw? Will they probably get another W? And who do they play in the Europa League final, Daniel? And they may have their answer. But it wasn't easy, and it's definitely going to be down to the second leg as Marseille and Atalanta play to a draw in France. And boy, this was actually a pretty fun match to watch.
No, it was. And I was pulling for Atalanta, who obviously knocked Liverpool out, but the best player on the pitch yet again was Gianluca Scamacca, the West Ham reject. And he is just, on his day and when he feels like playing a little bit like Leroy Sané, he's an unstoppable force. And he scored yet again here. It wasn't, the prettiest goal, but that didn't matter. And an absolute vintage performance or goal by the center back Chancel Mbemba, who just, steps up big outside the box and has a nice little curler to the back post to keep Marseille in this tie. Now, Marseille had a really, really good opportunity to go up 2-1 before half off a counterattack. Atalanta were caught high. Aubameyang was released on the break and just put it just wide, and he's been fantastic this whole season, even at 34 years of age. So if anyone's going to make Marseille believe, it's Aubameyang. So we'll see kind of how Atalanta kind of navigate this fixture at home. But seeing how they played at home against Liverpool when Liverpool had everything to play for, I'm fairly confident that Atalanta will be able to get it done. They also have Scalvini back in the back, which is definitely a big boost for them as he's been injured for the last couple weeks. And I think it's going to be an Atalanta Bayer Leverkusen final, which will be an excellent attacking treat as both managers, Gasperini and Xabi Alonso, are highly touted attacking managers. And I think we're, not only in the Champions League final, but in the Europa League final are going to have some fantastic matches.
Couldn't agree with you more. Of course, Europa League will be in Dublin, and the Champions League final will be in Wembley. So the English Isles are going to have two great finals, it looks like. Of course, there's still a second leg to go. No English teams. No, and potentially all German teams in Champions League in England, which would be a big storyline as well, which we can cover at a different date. Of course, there's history that dates that discussion, which we'll see what happens. There's still a lot to play for in both games, in all four games, really, if you will. But Daniel, I know that there's actually one tournament that a lot of us don't necessarily keep an eye out for, but you're very invested in this Europa Champions League, this tournament. And I'm curious, I know that you were watching it because you texted me saying that you were watching Villa bottle it. Give us a rundown on how Aston Villa played against Olympiacos. And then we'll touch quickly on the Fiorentina Club Bruges game, which had its moments as well.
I've been a closet Villa fan all season. After I'm a sucker for career mode and things like that, and building a competent roster. I love like the GM mind space as well as the tactical outlook. But I do love constructing a roster. I've loved what Aston Villa have done for the last 6 to 12 months here with Emery at the helm. And I've been just so impressed. They're in fourth and in pretty good position in the Premier League. And at home, Villa had been fantastic. And they lost to Olympiacos 4-2 at home. And especially this result was surprising, but especially having a manager like Unai Emery, who's, he's touted most known for his Europa League, heroics with Sevilla. But different competition, but he got it wrong today. And Olympiacos went up 2-0. Ollie Watkins tied it or made it a little bit of a game at 2-1, who's been probably Villa's best player all season. And I think they were able to tie it here. And then just there was a penalty, a handball, which is just really unlucky from Douglas Luiz. And then there was a goal in the 67th minute that they scored off kind of it was like a shot outside the box. I think it took a deflection for Martinez to just not be able to react there. So an absolute shocker. I'm kind of just really, as a Premier League stan, I love all the leagues, as most of you listeners know, and I watch a lot of different football here, but I am having a strong belief that the Premier League is the best league in the world. And we're looking at, Europa competition, all European competitions with potentially no English teams in there. And it's got me questioning life here because I asked John a couple weeks ago when he came on, is this a product of the Premier League being so hard that when these teams get late in the season, they kind of just run out of gas, or is every game just a standalone and sometimes the better team wins? I'd like to hear your opinion on that, but when it comes to the game, I just couldn't believe what I was watching.
Yeah, I think tournament in anything is totally different than a competition, right? I think top to bottom, take away Sheffield United probably this season, and you can look historically, probably 1-19 in Premier League has always been competitive. You never know what you're going to get. There's definitely been times when the 19th place team has beaten the top team in the side, or just week in, week out. We've talked about going to Molyneux is a hard place. Going to Bournemouth is tough. Going to Palace, and those are mid to bottom table teams. And so top to bottom, that league is so competitive that when you're looking at it week in, week out in a 38 game season, you're going to see the quality of the league. And that's where I think it gets misconstrued between what is a competition, 1 or 2 game knockout type of environment versus a 38, 40 game season. Right. And I think to your point and John's point, it is a little bit of both. I think the more games that you play, let's put it this way. Okay. If you put a PSG side in the Premier League and had to play 38 games, they would not be first in the league as they are in the French league or in the Champions League. They probably would finish 7th, maybe 6th, and be fighting for that position. Just the way that the teams play week in, week out, and how much of a grind it is. And yet when you go to these not single competitions, in Atalanta, who, yes, Serie A is not a pushover. I'm not saying it's an easy league by any stretch of the imagination, but they have more gas than the Liverpool on a Thursday afternoon in Liverpool or in Atalanta. I just think it's not really apples to apples. I think a single elimination, you've seen it right in the NCAA tournament, which is why everyone loves the NCAA tournament. A 12 seed can be beaten by a 5 can be beaten by a 12, or more recently we've seen 16 seeds beat a 1 seed, because on any given game, they're professionals. They can beat each other and you never know. But 38 games out of the season, the best team's going to rise to the top. So I think it's a little bit of that, but I wouldn't look past this. I think people get a little bit caught up that, yes, there may not be an English side in any of these competitions anymore. By the way, Bayern Munich, they're pretty good. Real Madrid, they're pretty good. Barcelona, they're pretty good. So yeah, they're not playing in slouches either. So I think people need to just calm down when they say that the Premier League's overrated, because in realistic form, if their team was playing in the Premier League, they probably wouldn't be as good as they think they are. So that's really the way I would phrase it, and hopefully that resonates or makes some type of sense to the listener.
That does. And kind of how I was trying to think about this, and, it was a flawed thinking, is, where the hell would Olympiacos be in the Premier League right now? I would think they'd probably be on the cusp of relegation, to be honest. They'd probably be around like a Luton side. So I was like, wow, like this is a huge underdog that's kind of fighting and crushing one of the better teams in the Premier League this year, one of the better stories against, a very accomplished manager in Unai Emery. So that's why I was just trying to compartmentalize kind of what was happening in front of my eyes. But that's the beautiful thing about football. And kind of, you mentioned with basketball, like these standalone games, literally anything can happen. And it makes, why these European competitions are so fun and such a enjoyable watch for the neutral, is because you can flip on any game and anything can happen at any time, because, most of the time the winner or the favorite will win, but, probably a third of the time it's not the case. And that's what we're kind of seeing a lot in these competitions. So that makes it, so special. But to get to the last game here, Fiorentina are just able to edge past Brugge here, 3-2, a 91st minute winner, to go back to Brussels here for the second leg. There was a red card. Onyeka got the red card, and then Brugge immediately tied it up, which is another weird football moment there. But Brugge looked really good, and Fiorentina are kind of hot and cold. They got a very intriguing manager at the helm, and they've kind of been an interesting team to watch here and there within Serie A. But I think they'll be able to see it out, even though they're going to go on the road, and there's only a one, there's no away goal rules anymore, so that doesn't really matter. So they still have the lead in Brugge is going to have to go out and go win the game. So we'll see kind of how that second leg finishes. Some really interesting players on that Brugge team as well as Fiorentina. So we'll have to see how it goes. But another really good game for the neutral. 5 goals is always a fun time. And I'm really hoping for kind of the same in the second leg.
Yeah, of course, the winner of the Conference League gets automatic berth into the Europa League next season. So that'll be interesting to see which one of those teams, of course, probably not going to really get that opportunity if you're Olympiacos or Club Brugge. Fiorentina kind of on the outskirts there within Serie A, probably not going to happen for them. So really the only team here that's guaranteed arguably a bigger prize than the Conference League is Aston Villa, who look to be playing in Champions League ball next season. So which one of those
that could have played a factor
will take the prize? That definitely could have. That definitely could have,
you know?
For sure. So we'll see what happens. But again, we have 8 really 8 games, 8 really good games left. 6 games. No, I was right. 6 games. Math is hard. 6 really good matchups here left to go in Europe. Of course, Europe being the best competition. That's what you want to see. You want to see fun games in the biggest competitions at this point of the season. So we'll keep you posted. Of course, second legs are coming up. I believe it's in 2 weeks or maybe next week. And we'll definitely recap. We'll recap those when they happen. But Daniel, with that being said, there is still domestic league games. There's some big ones, and we're going to predict those for you right now, as we do every Thursday on the prediction show. Daniel usually picks these, sends them my way, but we're going to change things up a little bit. I'm going to fire them back at him, especially the first couple, because some of them are more games that he's going to need to predict versus me. But I'm going to start us off here, Daniel. We have a 6-pointer, although Everton feels to be clear now at this point.
Mathematically,
Everton, they are technically clear, so they are all set. We are down to 3 teams for 2 spots, with Sheffield being relegated. We have Luton, Burnley, and Forest. Luton playing Everton at home at Kenilworth Road. Does Luton get a huge 3 points and put pressure back on Forest to get a result over the weekend?
No. I think even though that Everton are mathematically, safe, I think that they're going to want to win this game no matter what. They're going to want to finish the season on a high note. Luton have just been so bad as of late, the last probably month or so. It's not the same Luton we were looking at and talking about throughout the season, who rather unlucky most of the time. It seems like they've, with the injuries, they finally ran out of gas. I think Everton win here, even though it's at Luton, and I think they win, I'd say 2-0. What about you?
I'm going to go last stand for Luton. I think they find a way to get a point. I don't think they get a win, but I think they get a point and they keep the train going. They make it a little bit more nervy for Forest. I think a 2-2 draw. We'll see what happens for Forest going forward. Now, the next game, of course, if we're talking about Luton, we got to talk about Forest. We got to talk about Forest, right? So Forest versus Sheffield. Of course, Sheffield mathematically relegated. Unfortunately for Chris Wilder and his men, they will be playing in the championship next season. This game means more to Forest, of course. You mentioned Sheffield, or you mentioned Everton wanting to go out on a high note. Don't count out Sheffield for not wanting to do the same as they go out, even though they are going out no matter what. Does Forest get this result to give themselves a little bit of breathing room, especially given that I just said a draw for Luton?
I think Forest gets it done. I think they're the much better side. I think Sheffield are fairly terrible. So I'm going to back Forest here to win comfortably, even though it is at Sheffield. And I think they're going to, with my other prediction, I think they're going to be able to put themselves 4 points ahead of Luton. And I think that'll be the final nail in the coffin for Luton Town, as sad as it is.
Not too sure about Forest. I haven't been very confident in them. They played Manchester City relatively well.
They look good, though. They did. Yeah.
They did, but it's been inconsistent for Nuno's men. I'm going to take Sheffield at home. I think they get a 1-0 result here, and it just shapes up for a really, really great battle. They'll be tied on points if the result keeps what I said with Luton and Everton at 26 points, and then it's game on for the last 3 games of the season. So I'm going to go Sheffield 1-0. I just don't feel confident. I just don't feel confident in Nuno Espirito Santo and Forest. It's just, for whatever reason, it's up and down, up and down. I just can't get a hold of them.
Yeah, and I probably would give Sheffield more of a backing if Ollie McBurney and James McAtee were playing here. They're both, out injured. And so just what I've seen, the last 4 results have been 4-1 Burnley to Sheffield, 4-2 to Manchester United, and then 5-1 to Sheffield. I think Sheffield has finally kind of given up on things. That's why I give Sheffield or Forest the edge here. But we'll go ahead and move on. Is Liverpool going to give, and I'll pose this to you because I'll go second since I definitely have some bias in here. Is Liverpool going to deal Spurs their 4th straight defeat to kind of pencil them in where 4th place is not attainable, and maybe they could slip all the way to 6th place, which probably won't happen, but still.
4th is definitely not attainable anyway, regardless of this result, in my opinion. 6th, like I said during the main segment of the show, probably not really going to be caught either. I'll take a 2-2 draw. I think this is a fun matchup. I think Liverpool needs to get some goals, get some form. Spurs clearly need that as well, but I'll go 2-2 draw. I think they get a little bit more firepower. Ange gets a little bit last ditch effort from the boys for the rest of the season, and it starts with Liverpool. Now they have a really difficult schedule still come. They have to play Manchester City still as well after Liverpool, so no easy feat for Spurs from here. But I'll take 2-2. What about you? Theoretically, Liverpool are not mathematically out of the title race.
They're out of this thing, so I'm honestly not looking forward to this game because I think Spurs are going to really, I hope, like what you said, they're on kind of vacation time at this point, thinking about, what beach they're going to be at the end of the season. I just haven't seen a single thing from Liverpool the last 6 weeks that makes me believe that they can go, and even though they're at Anfield, go and win. But maybe they find a little bit wind in their sails late, maybe like a 3-2 game here, but that's also asking Liverpool to score 3 goals, which seems almost mathematically impossible at this rate. I think Liverpool will just be able to edge out a win, but I'm not confident at all.
Well, you heard it here, folks. He's just officially given up on his team. They're only 6 points back, 5 points back with 3 games to go. Mathematically, not eliminated, but in Daniel's mind, they're out. Now, rapid fire here on the next couple games as we're getting close to time. Girona, Barcelona, the big surprise for us, Daniel. We talked about it on the Sunday episode about how surprised we are with Girona. This is an opportunity for them to make that last statement, nail in the coffin type of situation where they could beat Barcelona, jump them in the table, and stake their claim for potentially 2nd place. What say you for Girona?
Every single time Girona have played a top 4 opponent, they've gotten crushed for the most part. But Barcelona haven't looked very convincing. I'm going to say it's a 2-1 Barcelona win.
I'll go 2-0 Barcelona. I think they've got a little bit more firepower and they're playing much, much better of late. And I think they, like you said, last time they've played a top 4 opponent, they got smashed against Real Madrid and then also against Atleti. So will be interesting to see what happens here. Now, a little bit of a game that didn't really feel like it had that much meaning until a couple weeks ago. It still really doesn't, as Bayern Munich have separated themselves slightly from Stuttgart, but a potential 6-pointer here going into the final weeks of the season. Stuttgart versus Bayern Munich. Does Stuttgart get a huge result to potentially give themselves a chance to catch Bayern Munich in 2nd place in the Bundesliga? What do you think on that one, especially with Champions League ahead of them?
I think Stuttgart get a draw at home. Bayern are going to obviously probably rest a ton of players because it's all eyes on the Champions League at this point. They could care less about the Bundesliga. So I think this is a really good position for Stuttgart. They gave Bayern an absolute scare last weekend. They're probably in their best form of the season, which is hard to say because they've been just so fantastic all season long. So I think it's going to be a 2-2 draw.
I hate to agree with you, but that's exactly where my head was going as we were thinking about this one. I'll take a 2-2 draw as well. Now, Bayer Leverkusen, you mentioned it. We've talked about the winning ways. Can they still get it done? They play an Eintracht Frankfurt team here who've kind of slipped a little bit of late, but a big scalp, if you will, if they can take out Bayer Leverkusen in this one. Do they get the job done, or does Xabi Alonso and his men continue to be undefeated in the Bundesliga?
Yeah, that's why I was in here. Are they going to keep the streak alive? I think this has draw written all over it. I'm going to say another 2-2 draw.
I'll go 1-0 Bayer. Don't feel confident about it. This could definitely be a draw, but I just, for some reason, this team feels like a team of destiny, like we've talked about. So give me Bayer Leverkusen to win it, and they continue their streak. Now, last game we want to talk about is in Serie A, Daniel, a game that means a hell of a lot to Roma for any European type of competition. Next season, they take on Juventus, who pretty much have locked in third place in the Serie A, although you never know, they could fall to fourth. Roma versus Juve. I know how we've talked about Allegri and how we don't necessarily like his play, and also De Rossi for Roma, what he's done after a big loss here against Bayer Leverkusen. Do they bounce back in the league on Saturday?
I'm going to go 1-1 nap game draw.
Well, you know how I feel about Serie A, so I'll take a 1-1 nap game draw as well.
Awesome. Well, you heard it here, folks. Thank you for listening into the show. As always, go follow us on Twitter at Fulltime Roundup. Follow the YouTube at Fulltime Roundup as well. And like and subscribe on YouTube. Give us a 5-star rating on any podcast form. And go ahead and check out our betting show with Harrison that dropped earlier this week. We had plays for all the European competitions, but we also have some absolute bangers for you this weekend. So go ahead and check that out, and we will catch you on Sunday.